I've always been a fan of chess and checkers, so I decided to actually try and see if I can make a board for myself. The wood of choice I'm going to be using is maple and roasted ash just for the contrast. This is actually my first time using roasted ash, and when I was cutting the board, it actually smells really good, almost like chocolate, but unfortunately I couldn't eat this board. Now the length of each piece I wanted to have the squares are 2 inches. So what I'm doing now is measuring just 17 inches, or actually 17 and a half inches on all my boards, just so I have a little bit of a wiggle room for when I make my cuts. Now to make these cuts, I'm using my crosscut sled that I made a couple videos ago. There are some issues with it, but it's still pretty good for making cuts with my circular saw. And once I had my boards all cut to length, it was now time to cut the 2-inch strips. And this left me with 8 pieces that are 2 inches wide and 17 and a half inches long. Now with these strips, I just have to glue them up on their edges side by side, making sure I'm alternating the colors. Now to get the checkered board pattern, what I have to do is to put one maple and then one roasted ash next to each other. Then after this glue up, all I have to do is flip and alternate the boards, and that's going to give me the checkered board pattern. I almost messed it up there. I thought I was making a cutting board for a second, but then I fixed it to make sure I had the right pattern there. Now for this I'm using Titebond 2. This is actually my first time using Titebond 2. I usually use Titebond 3 for all my builds, but assuming that I'm not going to take this underwater, I don't need to be fully waterproof. So Titebond 2 will just be fine for this build. So now it's time just to put the glue on joints for this. And then after I put the glue on the joints, I have to make sure to spread it out evenly. I don't have a glue spreader. I personally just use my finger just because, I don't know, it's so much easier and I can make sure that it gets in every single spot that I need it to. And once all the glue's there, just gotta flip the boards to the side and then clamp them up, making sure I got even pressure and then a little bit of squeeze out on all the joints. Now this, it's not very critical to have all the boards lined up, but I wanted to get them as straight as possible just to minimize the amount of excess I have to cut off at the end. And I actually ended up putting cowls on the top to make sure that the board doesn't cup. And it definitely helped out because it actually was cupping a little bit, and there was just a little bit of cracks I had to fix in the board. So what I ended up doing is getting some sawdust and mixing it in with the glue to make a little bit of the wood filler. And what I did is I just gently put it into the cracks, making sure that it covered up every single spot that was visible. Now comes my favorite part actually of the build, sanding. Now I was hand sanding this for a while and I really don't mind sanding at all. It's actually one of my favorite tasks to do. And once it's all sanded, I can finally cut the checkerboard pattern. So what I'm doing now is cutting 2-inch strips, so all the squares will be 2 inches by 2 inches. And after my first strip, it actually looks pretty cool. It's like one of those white and black checkered boards, like a checkered flag almost. Now when I was transporting it to my clamps, I actually dropped 3 of my pieces and I cracked a bit of them. So I actually had to re-glue them up, so the alignment of my boards were off slightly. Now I was constantly checking to make sure that I can finally get a, or hopefully get a good glue up there, but it was pretty tough just because some of the squares weren't lining up. But I decided to pursue on with it just because this is going to be my test board, and I'll probably end up making the board again using, I think, mahogany I want to use next time. But for now, this is just going to be the board that I make to see if it's possible to make it. Now I'm just repeating the same step as last time, putting the boards on its edge and gluing them together to make the checkered board pattern. And you can see that everything's actually coming together. It actually looks like a full-on chessboard and actually it looks really cool. And now with the clamps and cowls placed on the build, I just have to wait overnight and see my build come to life. Now it's a new day and I decided to check on my cutting board very early to make sure that all the squares were still aligned and nothing fell off. So on 3 of the pieces there was a couple cracks, but I can fill in with wood filler if I want. But for this piece I decided it's going to be an official test build. Now I tried to sand everything flat, and honestly this time my shoulder was hurting a little bit just because I went to the gym. So I decided to break out the orbital sander and went outside because it was pretty nice. Actually no, it was freezing cold, but still I ended up getting the job done. Now once I finished sanding, I brought the rest of the stuff outside so I can actually make a little chamfer at the bottom of the board. I used my 45-degree chamfering bit for this, so I clamped down my workpiece to my workbench and then brought out the old router and then routed some 45-degree chamfers at the bottom of the board just so it looks like there's a little bit of a lip at the bottom, and it turned out pretty well. And this is what my board looks like after applying a little bit of a lacquer finish. So as it stands right now, this is the final project, temporary project at least. There's some things I have to correct with my circular saw straight edge before I attempt this again. But it's crazy how just one bad cut and then, well, obviously dropping and breaking the thing has a big impact on the board. The final project does look pretty good. Just a couple squares aren't aligned because of the mix-up that I had. But I will be tackling this again, and honestly I might put this up in the shop in case anyone wants to buy my test board. And yeah, but I'll see you guys later, and hopefully I can get this done the next time.